Are you looking for better health but feel a little overwhelmed with it all, thinking there might be something missing? Maybe you're looking for action steps to take that get to the real root of the issue and actually move the needle in your health. Here on the Cornerstone Integrative Healing Podcast, we will share the link between our physical, emotional, and spiritual health, all while pointing you to the one and only true healer, Jesus. I'm Kari, Coody, your co-host. As a pharmacist turned integrative health practitioner, I spent 20 years in the traditional healthcare world, and it was definitely long enough to know there's a huge need for preventative healthcare and holistic healing. I'm excited to have conversations around these topics with my co-host and friend, Jenn.
Hey, I'm Jenn Patriarca. God gave me this desire to help others with natural healing a long time ago. With more than 20 years of experience in the functional nutrition field, God decided it was time to join forces. Kari and I are colleagues turned faithful partners in this mission God has put on our hearts. A mission for true healing, one that encompasses an integrative approach. With Jesus taking the lead, our aim is to point you toward Him as we help you peel back the layers. Through conversations, you can expect straightforward information on holistic health topics that include physical, emotional, and spiritual action steps that will create real change in your health, and honest conversations around the ups and downs that can come with healing. It's time to have joy in your life again and the energy to do all that God has called you to. Be sure to subscribe for new episodes every Monday.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. It's Kari here, and I'm here in person with Amanda. So we are very excited to dig into a topic that might seem like, well, what else are we going to know about our daily walk, right? You might be thinking like physical walk, but we're going to actually line it up metaphorically with a spiritual walk too. So I'm excited about this conversation because I feel like there's a lot that can be gleaned from it. So we're in the midst of our summer series and just thinking about how we can take small steps that really lead to big things. And so we hope we give you some new things to think about, new different ways to think about them maybe, and then also actionable steps that you can kind of start taking wherever you're at, honestly, and however much time you have. So, all right, Amanda.
Okay.
This is going to be a fun conversation. And like literally, this is going to be a genuine conversation because we have zero notes, but that's just how it goes and it's going to be great.
That's how we do most. That's pretty much how we do things.
That's true. So Amanda, when you think about taking a daily walk, like physical walk, and also in relation to spiritual walk, like what are the first things that come to your mind about like how important they are?
Well, I think that like for your physical walk, right?
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about the benefits of like what that does for you and just how walking every day, it builds you up, right? And so like it obviously there's so many things that it does for you, strengthens your muscles,
Mm-hmm.
your bones, but like I think more of even along the lines of just the motivation. Like when you go and walk, it motivates you. So, when you're tired and you're just like, I don't want to go and do it. But then when you go and do it, then you're like, oh, I've been revitalized. Right.
Yeah.
And so right. I think that correlates with our walk with the Lord, because it's when we don't feel like going and reading His word and spending time with Him. And then when we do it, what do we feel?
Right.
Revitalized and like, okay, like I have hope again. And so they think they just go hand in hand all the time.
Yeah. You know what it makes me think of, like, yes to all that. But what it makes me think of is like where we are as a society and just like quick fix mentality, maybe, is that we think, okay, well, if I'm going to go out and exercise, then I'm going to need to go to the gym for an hour or else it doesn't matter. So that's one thing I think about. But also as it relates to spiritually, sometimes it's like, okay, well, we go to church on Sunday and maybe that's like the equivalent of going to the gym. And then we don't feel like we need anything else until maybe Wednesday, but maybe the next Sunday. And so it's like, it's kind of thinking about changing your mentality to thinking about daily things versus like weekly things or like bursts of energy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's true. And that's a good point that you made, because I'm constantly like, I just had a conversation, today's Right. I just had a conversation yesterday with somebody about how that daily, just walking daily, like we have that mindset of we have to go to the gym and do all of these hard things. And I'm not saying those things are not right. I'm just saying that we negate how sometimes the simple things, but it's the consistency of them.
Yeah.
Right. It's how they build on each other. So our consistency with walking daily turns into, before you know it, you're like, wow, I'm walking. Maybe you started only walking for 15 minutes. Yeah. And now you're walking for maybe an hour, and you're walking way farther than you were when you first started. So it's just about, it's that endurance that it builds. Right. And so we say simple sometimes. It's like, oh, it's too simple. Sometimes simple is what we need.
Right. And I mean, if you think about how stressed and overwhelmed we are with so many other things, which is a whole different topic, this could actually be like an anchor, right? Like the Lord is supposed to anchor us. Well, this could be like a physical anchor too, as far as just, rhythm, I guess, more so, if that makes more sense versus an anchor. It just helps us to have rhythm to our day, which is very comforting to us, and then it helps our body to know what to expect. And also just that, how much peace the Lord gives us when we are in his presence and we are in his word, and doing that daily. Doesn't everybody want more peace? It's like, if we truly knew the peace that it gave, we would be way more intentional about, this is a non-negotiable. Like, I think sometimes it's like, oh, well, if I get time to go on a walk, or if I get time to sit down, like I want to, but like, are you making it a priority?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And what is a priority? We find time for, right? Like, we say we don't have time for things, but if it's important to us,
we're going to find time.
That's right. Maybe some things have to drop off.
Yeah.
It's the same with health in general. Like, some things maybe are a priority to you to begin with, and then they change. Your priorities change over time.
Yeah.
And then you just like, wow, I can't believe that I used to do that. And now I'm doing these things. Or, it just, our priorities determine what we find time for.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like we have like the best of intentions, but we're just, I think it goes back to also like, what are we chasing after? Like, are we chasing after, success or money, or there's so many things you could put in that's really what determines our priorities a lot of times.
Even chasing health.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. Like, we've had that conversation a lot about anything in a large in a consuming way. When it consumes you, it's not coming from the right place. And therefore your heart isn't in the right place. Like that's ultimately what it is. And so even a good thing can be maybe too much if it consumes you.
Right. I think it does go back to a heart posture, and it really kind of goes back to like a heart divided. Your heart isn't fully set on the Lord. And so you are going to feel conflicted and maybe overwhelmed and confused and all the things, because you haven't really made a decision yet on who you're going to follow. And
that teetering, back and forth.
That's exhausting too.
Yes.
I was just thinking about this.
That's exactly what I was thinking of. Like a seesaw. I don't know. I haven't seen one of those in years, but anyway, just that whole back and forth. Right. And that is exhausting, of like trying to find that balance.
Yeah. And I just this keeps coming up in conversations, but I went to a youth conference, and the speaker was talking about how you can be physically exhausted and get rest and, and recover in a day, but we shouldn't really be soul level exhausted. And that's what a lot of people are, because they aren't feeding that part of their health, or their, we're physical, emotional, spiritual beings. Like, you can't separate those. And so it all goes together. And I know we've talked a lot about that on this podcast, but I just keep coming back to that. You can't separate the two. And that's why I wanted to talk about these things together, because I think they have so much correlation with each other. Just think about a walk, like a physical walk. You just put one foot in front of the other. That's kind of what you do spiritually as well, right? I mean, and it's sort of like sometimes you feel like you can't see what's in front of you, and that's scary. But all he's asking you to do is trust him and put one foot in front of the other, and not. And then there's a whole thing about running ahead and lagging behind, and so it's like a good steady pace is really what he's asking us to do. Like, and he wants to guide us.
So what I thought about when you were saying that, about that going ahead, lagging behind, is the importance of having like others around you.
Right.
Because in both situations, they're both encouraging. Maybe you don't physically walk with someone every single day, but you on occasion walk with other people. Or, and on your spiritual walk, like being on that walk by yourself can feel like a lonely place sometimes. And so having other people around you as you're growing together, then you're going back and forth and asking the questions and saying, this is what I saw. What did you see? Or there's just, it's more than just accountability. Right. It has more, it's with that community aspect of like, we were built, like, that's how he made us. He made us to want other people. And so often we think, well, I can do this by myself. And it's not that you can't.
It's just so much more fun.
Yeah.
And also it made me think about, I think it was last summer or sometime, we did like a family run. And so,
I love how you did your quotation.
I know. I don't know. We must have been bored or something. We were like, okay, we're going to see who can get back to it was really a race, but it was kind of, And so my son just took off and never stopped. And it was just like beat us all. But it was funny because I was thinking about my daughter. She would like go ahead of me and then she would get tired and then I would pass her. And I was going the same speed. And she would go ahead of me and then she would go behind. And she was exhausted. Like she could barely finish. And it just made me think like, why do we do that? I kept telling her like, if you would just go a reasonable speed, I think you would do better. But,
it's that whole, like when we have the idea of it's a sprint.
Yeah. We want to get finished. I feel like we want to check it off the box sometimes. And it's like, okay, well, what does that even mean?
Yeah, but it's not, it's a marathon.
Right.
Like it is a marathon. And that's how our spiritual walking physically, like just life. Yeah. Life is not a sprint. And we are so often trying to just hurry up and get through. But what are we trying to get through too?
I know. That's what made me think about too. Yeah. And I think we want our situation to change. Maybe we want to be in better shape physically, or maybe we want to hear from the Lord, or maybe we want this certain situation to be, have answers to. But it's like, if we truly believe his timing is perfect, then why are we trying to rush ahead? Because he's trying to teach us something, but we're like not listening.
Yeah. And not only that, but then there is that aspect of, okay, I get the whole wanting to get to maybe a different season, right?
Yeah.
And so but that's a goal.
Yeah.
That's not the end. And so we think that we're going to hurry up and get to the finish line, but really the finish line is when we go to meet Jesus.
Right.
Like that's the finish line.
And we don't know when that is,
No. And so it's sometimes the process at the middle part, the journey in between the seasons is when we most definitely, I can say from personal experience, it's when we learn the most.
Yeah. And we only have one spring and it's like, we want all this growth, but like, there's literally only one season for that truly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to be said about that for us too, and it got brought up at the Bible study that I do on Wednesdays. Somebody there was going through 1 Samuel and she was talking about how, they were going into battle or whatever. They didn't know when, but Jonathan was one of the main people that was kind of leading, and he didn't know when he was going to go into battle, but yet he was sharpening his sword every day, waiting. And it just, I don't know. I think we miss that sometimes. It's like, all right, we're ready, and we just stand there and we don't do anything, because we're like ready to get it over with or whatnot. But yeah, there's just so much to learn in that.
There is and you miss the joy.
Yeah.
Right. Like we're all seeking joy. Like who doesn't want more joy in their life? Right.
Yeah.
And so when we are just hurry up, like we're rushing through the process just to get to wherever we think we're trying to go, we miss the joy of the in between.
Yeah.
And really, I think ultimately that's what he's wanting us to find is the joy of spending time with him on a daily walk, the joy of seeing all the things that are around us when we're walking outside and listening to the birds and the trees, just all the blessings that he gave us.
Yeah.
And that's like, we're missing it. If we're trying to hurry up and rush, we're missing it.
Yeah, that's so true. And, I like I said, I wanted this to be both like, informational, make you think, but also actionable. So why don't we kind of move into the actionable Okay.
All
Well, let's talk about a physical walk. So what if, we were talking about this beforehand. Tell them what you were saying.
Okay. So I was just thinking about, I seen this thing the other day about talking about how if you walk 10,000 steps a day, which is the equivalent of 5 miles, if you walk that every day, you would walk 70 marathons in a year. And I was just like, wow, I've ran a marathon.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
And 70 of those. And so it comes back to perspective all the time. But from that, I thought, you know what? Everybody isn't walking that much.
Right.
But if you're not walking, if you're not moving, right? So sometimes we think we got to go out and walk. You don't necessarily have to, but it's about moving.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I just have to, what if your goal was just to walk 2.5 miles? That's 5,000 steps a day. Just make sure you're moving. Maybe part of that is going outside and going for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of it is just making sure you're moving and not being sedentary, right?
Yeah.
But just doing that, and I don't say just because it's a good goal.
Yeah.
But walking 5,000 steps, 2.5 miles a day, you will have ran 35 marathons in a year.
Yeah.
I mean, you will have done the equivalent.
Right. The equivalent.
Yeah. And so I'm just, that blows me away.
Yeah.
It puts it into perspective of when we think it's that whole thing of sometimes we see, like we hear marathon and we're like, oh my,
I could never do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I understand.
Mm-hmm.
But when you break it down into 2.5 miles a day, that's not that much. Maybe that's not even what your goal is. Maybe it's a little less, but
right. You got to start somewhere.
Whatever that is, if you just like by the end of a year, you will have moved that much. That's maybe more than you were moving.
Right. And it really is all about where you're at and just making realistic goals. Like that's what we're kind of trying to just encourage you to do, because again, there's nothing wrong with like having a plan to go to the gym and like whatever, but if you're not walking, like that needs to be, it would really help you to move toward that goal, and not only, I just think about, not only the physical benefits of a walk, like in nature, there's so many benefits to it being in nature.
Yes,
if you can,
I agree.
Didn't want to not talk about that, but also I just think about, I used to go on walks with like podcasts and things. And now I leave my phone at home, and like the Lord will talk to you, when I don't know, there's something about moving your body in nature, especially like that is my time with the Lord. So
if you don't want to hear from him, you should take your phone.
That's right. And, there's nothing wrong. And you may be like, I was listening to Christian music. I was probably listening to some kind of Christian podcast. Those things aren't bad, but it's not his voice.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we can fill our mind with so much of other people's voices, even if it's good. It's not his, and it's not maybe for us.
Yeah.
So I would encourage you to do that, no matter if it's like a 10-minute walk or, I think you need at least 10 minutes to probably get in the, but, start somewhere.
I can say from personal experience that I was a huge, so I've always been like, I've always loved running. And part of my story, it came out like it was not part of my life for quite a few years. And then when I got back into it, I thought like, I'm going to listen to music. Like that's because that's like what I was doing, especially when I was training for a half marathon and then a marathon. Well, really the half, because I didn't do it on the full, but it was at some point I decided I don't want anything. And sometimes my runs were a while.
Yeah.
But what I learned was I could hear from him what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could hear from him, and the most random things would come. Like I would be passing a mailbox. Like I remember one time I was passing a mailbox and I was struggling, and I was just like, if I could just get to that mailbox and let me get to that mailbox. And then I'm like, okay, let me do the next mailbox. Yeah. But it was him saying, keep going, just keep going. It doesn't matter the pace. And at that point, the other thing that I learned is that I was listening to my body more. Yeah. If I didn't have other things going on, I was more in tune with my body. I was more focused on my breathing. Mm-hmm. And that's even with walking, not just running. Right. That's true. And so you're more apt to listen. Like, do I need rest? Can I go longer? just, I don't know, all of these things. Like, we're just more in tune to our body.
For sure.
So
yeah, that to me, hopefully you can find something in there to just encourage you wherever you're at. Maybe you are already walking a good bit. Maybe it's just that you leave your phone at home. And some people that makes them get nervous. We don't know what to do without our phones. And it's a problem, like truly. I mean, and I'm speaking about myself too. Like, I intentionally try to leave my phone as much as I can because I think it's so important for us to do that, So hopefully that encourages you on the physical side. Well, what about the spiritual side?
Well, so because I saw that, the whole 10,000 steps, and how, you would be equivalent to 70 marathons, I just had this thought on, okay, well, what if we took that into our spiritual walk, right?
Yeah.
And so I looked at, if we read a half a chapter. Now, there was some things that I was trying to figure out before I came to this realization, right?
Yeah.
Because I was like, if you read a verse a year or a verse a day, and anyway, I was like, okay, let me reevaluate, which is what we have to do. Like, we're all constantly having to reevaluate and make new goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what it came down to is, if we read a half a chapter, just a half, okay, which seems like some chapters are longer than others.
Yeah, that's true. But
at least when you read a half chapter, you kind of get a good context, right? So sometimes if you're reading one verse, then you're like, well, what is the context? And we kind of lose it. But if you read a half a chapter, so I'm just talking about the New Testament, because for somebody who's new on their faith walk, the Old Testament, there's a lot of law and just history, and
which is great, but
it
might not be the best place to start.
Yes. And so you don't want to feel discouraged, right? Like, we're trying to help you set yourself up for motivation. Like, you want to motivate yourself to keep going. And so, talking about the New Testament, if you read a half a chapter every day for an entire year, you will have read through the first 12 books of the New Testament. So that's Matthew all the way to, now I have to think. I should have really thought.
Yeah, I can't think that fast. It's all right. The first 12.
The first 12.
Yeah.
And so that's a good portion, right?
Yeah,
it's almost halfway through the New Testament. You will have a great understanding. And by that point, you'll have established a habit of just continuing to get in the Word.
Right.
And so it seems, it's manageable. Manageable, but yet a little challenging.
Yeah. So take that, and wherever you're at, maybe modify it, right? But it's just about the daily habit, and I just wanted to share something too. If you're listening, you're like, well, I've read through the Bible before, and and you're already doing daily work. What I've found really interesting lately is to just take one verse and look at it in different translations. And also, like we were talking about last week, Hebrew, like taking some words and looking at the Hebrew meaning, and just kind of really like deep diving on a verse or two. That has been really something God's been using for me. So I think wherever you're at, just challenge yourself to go a little bit deeper. I think that's all we're trying to encourage with here.
Exactly. So, it's not supposed to be overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right. It's supposed to be, it's supposed to motivate you to keep going.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be challenging in some way, because challenge is good for, like, it stretches us and it grows us. And that's how endurance is made.
Yep. And so that's really what he's asking us to do, is get more endurance, spiritually and honestly, physically. Those two, they line up, right? Our bodies were made to move. So, and two, like, we want endurance to be able to do it all he's called us to do. That is definitely our main focus here at Cornerstone, to look at health from that view, not from, okay, I want a certain body, and so I need to do this, because that will lead you down a path that,
well, it's
it is self-focused,
like, and so we're trying to encourage people to look at a him focus. Like, what is he calling you to? Right. And we so much focus on, especially as women, on weight, right? But your weight is a reflection of what's going on the inside. Yeah. And he is concerned about what's going on the inside in multiple levels.
Right.
And so it's when that is healed in all parts and focused on him, that the outward stuff then follows.
Right. And he wants us to be happy.
Yeah.
Wherever we're at. Again. Right. Yeah.
Right. So joy is talked about in the Bible a lot. There's a reason for it. He wants us to find joy.
Right. And you can find it no matter what situation you're in, no matter what, I know like there's just some hard stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Like for sure. And I just think he always wants us to find joy. And it really, honestly, a lot of what we're talking about is slowing down and making, and just having priorities that ground you. These two things do that. So hopefully you just feel encouraged and inspired to challenge yourself wherever you are. And just really, we want you to know that these two things are just so important for your daily walk and really tuning into him and seeing what he wants for you. So we pray that you would do that through prayer. And I know he's going to show you, because when we ask, he does show us. So Thanks for joining me, Amanda. This was really great.
This was fun. I enjoyed it.
Definitely. I'm sure you'll be back. Let us know, though, if you have questions about what we talked about, or want to go deeper on any topic. We would always love that. We'll put our contact information in the show notes. We'll see you guys on the next episode.
Bye.